From a chimpanzee in a robot suit to basketball players masquerading as chrome killers, the original Battlestar Galactica hid some truly bizarre secrets behind its gleaming colonial facades. This supposedly space-age series was actually riddled with Mormon theology, deadly toys, interrupted by peace treaties, and powered by equipment that stagehands used for video games. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about Battlestar Galactica. Fact 1. A chimpanzee played the robot dog. When viewers watched young Boxy playing with his faithful robotic companion Muffet the Daggett on Battlestar Galactica, they were actually witnessing one of television's most unusual casting decisions. The supposedly high-tech robot dog was played by a real chimpanzee named Evolution, though everyone on set called her Evie for short. This wasn't just a simple case of putting an animal in a costume and rolling cameras. It was a complex production challenge that created both memorable moments and significant difficulties behind the scenes. Evolution was owned and trained by exotic animal trainer Ralph Helfer, who specialized in working with primates for film and television productions. The decision to use a live animal instead of a mechanical puppet or early animatronics came down to the limitations of 1970s special effects technology and budget constraints. Creating a convincing robotic dog that could move naturally and interact with child actor Noah Hathaway would have been extremely expensive and technically challenging for a television production, even one with Battlestar Galactica's substantial budget. However, working with Evolution presented its own set of problems. The costume that transformed her into Muffet was heavy, restrictive, and often uncomfortable for the chimpanzee to wear for extended periods. Directors Alan Levy and Richard Colla later recalled that it wasn't always easy to get Evie to perform when she was inside the bulky suit, and there were limits to how long she could work before becoming agitated or tired. Despite these challenges, Evolution managed to bring a believable sense of life and personality to Muffet that helped make the character work on screen. Cast members who worked with her, including Dirk Benedict, Herbert Jefferson Jr., Noah Hathaway, Lorette Spang, and Anne Lockhart, generally had positive memories of working with the talented chimpanzee. Evolution could even perform some basic stunts while in costume, adding to the illusion that Muffet was truly a sophisticated piece of colonial technology rather than a living, breathing primate in disguise. Fact 2. Basketball players were the Cylons. The menacing chrome-armored Cylons that terrorized the human survivors throughout Battlestar Galactica weren't portrayed by professional actors or stunt performers, but rather by a team of unemployed basketball players that creator Glenn A. Larson specifically recruited for the role. This unusual casting decision came about because of a very practical problem that the production team encountered when designing the iconic Cylon Centurion costumes. They needed actors who were tall enough to make the robotic warriors look truly imposing and intimidating on screen. The Cylon armor and helmets were built to very specific dimensions, and the production team determined that anyone wearing the complete costume needed to be over 6 feet tall to achieve the right proportions and commanding presence that the script demanded. Finding enough traditionally trained actors of that height who were available for the extended filming schedule proved to be more difficult than expected, so Larson came up with a creative solution that solved multiple problems at once. Rather than compromise on the visual impact of the Cylons or spend additional money redesigning the costumes, Larson decided to look outside the usual pool of Hollywood talent. He reached out to basketball players who were between seasons or looking for work, knowing that they would naturally have the height requirements needed for the roles. These athletes also had the physical conditioning necessary to perform in the heavy, restrictive costumes for long periods during filming, which was an important consideration given how uncomfortable and hot the metallic suits could become under studio lights. The basketball players brought an unexpected athleticism to their performances as Cylons, moving with a coordination and physical presence that might have been harder to achieve with shorter actors wearing platform shoes or other height-enhancing modifications inside the costumes. Their natural ability to move fluidly while maintaining balance and coordination served them well when navigating in the bulky armor, helping to create the distinctive walking style and imposing screen presence that made the Cylon Centurions such memorable villains in science fiction television history. Fact 3, the show is Mormon theology in space. What many viewers didn't realize while watching Battlestar Galactica was that they were experiencing a science fiction adventure deeply rooted in the religious beliefs of its creator, Glenn A. Larson, who was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Larson didn't simply borrow a few concepts here and there. He systematically wove Mormon theology and organizational structure throughout the entire fabric of the show, creating what was essentially a space-based allegory for LDS doctrine and history. The most obvious example is the planet Kobol, which served as the ancient homeworld of humanity in the series mythology. Kobol is a direct anagram of Kolob, which in Mormon theology is described as the star or planet nearest to the throne of God. This wasn't a coincidence or subtle nod. It was a deliberate reference that Larson embedded into the core mythology of his fictional universe. Similarly, when characters in the show got married, the ceremony was called a sealing, which is the exact term used in Mormon temple wedding ceremonies where couples are believed to be joined for time and eternity, not just until death. The political structure of the 12 colonies also mirrored LDS church organization, with the colonies being governed by a quorum of 12 representatives, paralleling the quorum of the 12 apostles that helps lead the Mormon Church. Even the overall narrative structure of the show reflected Mormon beliefs about lost tribes and the gathering of scattered peoples, similar to stories found in the Book of Mormon about groups of Israelites who traveled to distant lands. At one point in the series, the characters actually encounter a group of angelic beings who quote LDS Church President Lorenzo Snow, telling the Galactica crew, "As you are, we once were. As we are, you may become." This was a direct reference to a famous Mormon teaching about the potential divine nature of humanity and the progression of souls toward godhood, making it one of the most explicit religious references in the entire series. Fact 4. Toys actually killed a child. The tragic reality behind Battlestar Galactica's merchandising success turned deadly on Christmas Day, 1978, when what should have been a joyful holiday became a family's worst nightmare. A 4-year-old child was playing with his new Cylon Raider toy, one of the popular spacecraft models that Mattel had produced to capitalize on the show's popularity, when he accidentally shot a small plastic pellet from the toy directly into his mouth during play. The pellet, which was designed to simulate the laser fire from the Cylon spacecraft, became lodged in the child's larynx and could not be removed. This created a life-threatening situation that deprived his brain of oxygen, and despite medical efforts to save him, the little boy was declared dead 6 days later on New Year's Eve. The timing made the tragedy even more heartbreaking, as families across the country were celebrating the end of one year and the beginning of another. The incident wasn't an isolated case, as there had already been concerns about the safety of these projectile-firing toys. George Lucas and his legal team had previously raised objections about the Battlestar Galactica toy line, partly because they worried that the firing pellets could be confused with similar Star Wars toys and create safety issues that might reflect poorly on their own merchandise. Lucas had specifically warned that these types of projectile toys constituted a choking hazard for children, though none of the competing Star Wars toys featured similar firing mechanisms. Within just 2 weeks of the child's death, Mattel issued an immediate and comprehensive recall of all Battlestar Galactica toys that featured firing missiles or pellets. The company also faced a lawsuit from the boys' grieving parents, who sought to hold them responsible for the design flaws that led to their son's death. Additionally, there was a second incident involving a Colonial Viper toy that required emergency surgery to remove an inhaled pellet from another young boy's lungs. Though fortunately, that child survived the ordeal. Fact 5. The premiere was interrupted by peace. Television history was made on September 17, 1978, when the highly anticipated 3-hour premiere of Battlestar Galactica became the first major network television event to be interrupted by breaking news of an international peace agreement. About 30 minutes before the scheduled end of the epic pilot episode, ABC suddenly cut away from the fictional space drama to provide live coverage of the signing of the Camp David Accords at the White House, creating one of the most unusual viewing experiences in television history. The Camp David Accords represented a historic breakthrough in Middle East diplomacy, as Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and Egyptian President Anwar Sadat had agreed to a framework for peace between their two nations after 13 days of negotiations facilitated by President Jimmy Carter at the presidential retreat. The timing of the announcement coincided almost perfectly with the climactic scenes of the Battlestar Galactica premiere, forcing ABC executives to make the difficult decision to interrupt their expensive new science fiction spectacle for this momentous real-world event. The interruption lasted for nearly an hour, during which viewers watched the formal ceremony and heard analysis from news correspondents about the significance of this diplomatic achievement. Many young fans of the show were reportedly frustrated by the interruption, especially those who were already staying up past their normal bedtime on a school night to watch the conclusion of the space adventure. Some parents had to negotiate with anxious children who were afraid they would miss the ending of the show they had been eagerly anticipating. However, ABC handled the situation in a way that satisfied both their news obligations and their entertainment commitments. After the special news coverage concluded, the network picked up the Battlestar Galactica premiere exactly where it had left off, ensuring that viewers could see the complete pilot episode without missing any scenes. This decision pushed back all subsequent programming on the network by nearly an hour, affecting late-night local newscasts and other scheduled shows across the Eastern and Central time zones. Fact 6. Scripts were written minutes before filming. The chaotic production schedule that plagued Battlestar Galactica during its first season created one of the most stressful working environments in television history, with scripts literally being completed just minutes before cameras started rolling. This nightmare scenario developed when ABC made a sudden decision after the successful premiere of the pilot episode, completely changing the show's planned format from a series of made-for-television movies to a weekly episodic series, catching creator Glenn Larson and his entire production team completely off guard. Originally, Larson had envisioned Battlestar Galactica as a limited series consisting of a 3-hour pilot followed by 2 additional 2-hour episodes television movies, which would have allowed for a more manageable production schedule and higher quality writing. However, after the pilot aired to strong ratings in September 1978, network executives decided they wanted to capitalize on the show's popularity by ordering a full season of weekly, hour-long episodes, fundamentally changing the scope and pace of production without giving the creative team adequate time to prepare. This sudden format change meant that the writing staff, who had been developing scripts for longer television movies, now had to scramble to create enough material for 24 individual episodes while maintaining the show's expensive production values and complex special effects sequences. The time crunch became so severe that scripts were often being finished and delivered to the set with only minutes to spare before filming was scheduled to begin, leaving actors with no time to properly memorize their dialogue or develop their character performances. As a result of this impossible scheduling pressure, the production team had to resort to placing cue cards around the set so that actors could read their lines while performing their scenes. This created a noticeable impact on the quality of performances throughout the series, as actors were often looking slightly off-camera to read their dialogue rather than making natural eye contact with their scene partners or delivering their lines with the kind of conviction that comes from having time to properly rehearse and internalize the material. Fact 7. The Galactica model was stolen. One of the most valuable and iconic props from the original Battlestar Galactica series has been the subject of an unsolved mystery for decades, as the original filming model of the massive Battlestar spacecraft disappeared without a trace and has never been recovered. This wasn't just any ordinary piece of television memorabilia. It was the primary miniature model used for all the close-up shots and detailed sequences featuring the titular spacecraft, making it an irreplaceable piece of science fiction television history that would be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars today. After the series ended and its short-lived sequel, Galactica 1980, was canceled, Universal Studios decided to put the original Galactica model on public display as part of their studio tour attractions. For several years, fans could visit Universal and see the detailed miniature up close, marveling at the intricate craftsmanship that had brought the massive space vessel to life on their television screens. The model had been carefully restored specifically for this display, with special attention paid to ensuring it looked as impressive as possible for the thousands of visitors who came to see it. However, when Universal Studios eventually decided to remove the display and update their tour attractions, the Galactica model mysteriously vanished during the transition process. Despite extensive searches and investigations, no one has been able to determine what happened to the precious miniature or where it might have ended up. The disappearance was so complete and puzzling that Universal Studios has officially classified the model as stolen property, though they have never been able to identify any suspects or recover the missing piece. The loss represents more than just a financial blow to the studio. It eliminated a crucial piece of television and special effects history that could never be truly replaced. While other models and props from the series still exist in various collections and museums, the original hero model of the Galactica was unique in its detail and construction, having been built specifically for the demanding requirements of television production and used in countless memorable scenes throughout the show's run. Fact 8. Rick Springfield played Apollo's doomed brother. Before Rick Springfield became famous for his hit song Jesse's Girl and his role on the soap opera General Hospital, he made a brief but memorable appearance in the Battlestar Galactica pilot as Lieutenant Zack, the youngest son of Commander Adama and the eager younger brother of Captain Apollo. This casting decision turned out to be particularly poignant because Zack's character was destined to become the first human casualty of the Cylon attack, making Springfield's performance one of the most emotionally impactful moments in the entire 3-hour premiere episode. In the pilot episode titled Saga of a Star World, Zack is portrayed as an inexperienced but enthusiastic colonial warrior who desperately wants to prove himself worthy of his family's military legacy. Despite his lack of real combat experience, Zack had received high marks at the academy that actually exceeded even his father's academic achievements, though this detail was included in a deleted scene that didn't make it into the final broadcast version. The character's youth and eagerness to please made his tragic fate all the more devastating for viewers who connected with his earnest desire to live up to his older brother's reputation. The pivotal scene occurs when Zack convinces his friend Starbuck to fake an illness so that he can take Starbuck's place on a routine patrol mission with Apollo. During this patrol, the two brothers discover a massive Cylon ambush fleet hiding near the moon of Simtar, leading to a desperate dogfight in which Zack's Viper fighter is severely damaged. Unable to keep up with Apollo's ship while being pursued by Cylon raiders, Zack encourages his brother to leave him behind and warn the colonial fleet of the impending attack. The emotional weight of Zack's death scene, combined with Springfield's sincere performance, provided a powerful opening to the series that established the real stakes and consequences of the human-Cylon conflict. When President Adar asks about the bright explosion visible in space, Commander Adama's simple response of, "That was my son, Mr. President," became one of the most quoted lines from the entire series. Fact 9. Tektronix donated $3 million in equipment. The impressive high-tech appearance of the Battlestar Galactica's bridge and command centers wasn't achieved through expensive Hollywood prop construction, but rather through a remarkable corporate partnership that brought real cutting-edge computer technology to the television screen. Set decorator Mickey S. Michaels approached Tektronix Incorporated, a major computer hardware manufacturer based in Oregon, with an unusual proposal that would benefit both the television production and the technology company's marketing efforts. Tektronix agreed to donate approximately $3 million worth of their latest computer hardware and electronic equipment to be used throughout the Galactica sets, along with a large number of high-quality television monitors that were worth about $35,000 at the time. This wasn't just a generous gift. It was a strategic business decision that gave Tektronix valuable exposure to millions of television viewers who would see their equipment being used in a futuristic setting, potentially associating their brand with advanced space-age technology. The equipment that Tektronix provided wasn't just decorative props designed to look impressive on camera. These were fully functional computers and electronic systems that actually worked during filming. This created an unexpected problem for the production crew, as the stagehands and other workers on set quickly discovered that they could use the sophisticated equipment to play computer games during breaks in filming. The games became so popular and distracting that they actually began to interfere with the shooting schedule, as crew members would become engrossed in playing rather than focusing on their assigned tasks. In exchange for this substantial donation of equipment, Tektronix received prominent screen credit in the show's end titles, ensuring that their company name would be visible to the millions of viewers who watched Battlestar Galactica each week. This arrangement represented one of the early examples of product placement in science fiction television, where a real technology company provided actual working equipment rather than just paying for their products to be featured on screen, creating an authentic futuristic environment that helped establish the show's distinctive visual style. Fact 10. Sense-Around literally shook theaters. When Universal Studios decided to release the Battlestar Galactica pilot as a theatrical film in 1979, they chose to enhance the movie experience with Sense-Around, a special audio technology that had been developed specifically to create physical sensations during certain scenes by using extremely powerful low-frequency sound effects. This decision made Battlestar Galactica historically significant as the fourth and final film ever to use the short-lived Sense-Around system, which had previously been featured in disaster movies like Earthquake, Midway, and Roller Coaster. The Sense-Around system worked by installing 4 massive additional speakers in participating theaters, which were capable of producing bass frequencies so low and powerful that audiences could actually feel the vibrations in their bodies during space battle sequences and other dramatic moments. The technology was designed to immerse viewers more completely in the action by making them physically experience the rumbling of spacecraft engines, the impact of explosions, and other sound effects that would normally only be heard rather than felt. However, the system proved to be almost too effective for its own good, creating unexpected problems that highlighted just how powerful these audio enhancements really were. The bass frequencies were so intense that they actually caused structural damage in some movie theaters, cracking plaster walls and ceilings where the buildings couldn't withstand the constant vibrations during action sequences. Even more problematic was the fact that the system couldn't differentiate between different types of audio. So, when Lorne Greene's deep, commanding voice delivered his dramatic dialogue as Commander Adama, the Sense-Around speakers would amplify those low tones to the same overwhelming levels as the special effects. This created a bizarre viewing experience where audiences found themselves being physically bombarded by the booming voice of the patriarch commander, often leaving theaters feeling dizzy and disoriented from the assault of sound waves. The combination of structural damage to theaters and complaints from audiences who were literally being shaken by the dialogue ultimately contributed to the abandonment of sense-around technology, making Battlestar Galactica's theatrical release a unique footnote in cinema history. Fact 11. George Lucas sued over 34 stolen ideas. In June 1978, just 2 months before Battlestar Galactica premiered on television, 20th Century Fox and George Lucas launched a major lawsuit against Universal Studios, claiming that the upcoming science fiction series had stolen 34 distinct ideas and concepts directly from Star Wars. The lawsuit alleged plagiarism, copyright infringement, unfair competition, and violations under the Lanham Act, representing one of the most comprehensive intellectual property battles in entertainment history at that time. Fox's legal team presented a detailed list of similarities between the two productions, including concepts like friendly robots that help the protagonists, comparing the relationship between C-3PO and R2-D2 to Battlestar Galactica's robotic Daggett Muffet. They also pointed to the used future aesthetic, where both productions made their spacecraft and technology look weathered and old rather than pristine and new, which was contrary to most previous science fiction productions that featured sleek, spotless equipment. However, Universal Studios was prepared to fight back with their own accusations, and they promptly filed a countersuit that turned the tables on Lucas and his legal team. Universal's lawyers argued that Star Wars itself had borrowed heavily from earlier science fiction works that they owned or controlled, particularly their 1972 film Silent Running, which featured robot companions called drones that bore similarities to Lucas's droids. They also claimed that Star Wars had taken inspiration from the 1930s Buck Rogers serials that Universal had produced decades earlier. The legal battle became even more complicated because both productions had employed some of the same key personnel, particularly special effects supervisor John Dykstra, who had worked on Star Wars before moving to Battlestar Galactica. This shared talent pool meant that some of the visual similarities between the two productions could be attributed to the same creative team using similar techniques and approaches rather than deliberate copying. The case dragged on for years, with Fox's initial claims being dismissed in 1980, though they appealed, and the matter wasn't finally resolved until 1983, when both parties settled out of court. Fact 12. John Colicos became a soap opera villain. John Colicos's memorable portrayal of the treacherous Count Baltar on Battlestar Galactica was so compelling and well-received that it directly led to one of the most famous casting decisions in daytime television history. The Canadian actor's ability to bring sophisticated menace and theatrical grandeur to the role of the human traitor who betrayed the 12 colonies to the Cylons caught the attention of soap opera producers who were looking for exactly that kind of commanding, villainous presence for their own dramatic storylines. In 1981, the producers of General Hospital offered Colicos the role of Mikos Kassadine, a mysterious and wealthy European aristocrat who would become the central antagonist in the show's ambitious Ice Princess storyline that ran during the summer of that year. This casting decision was directly influenced by his work as Baltar, as the soap opera's creators wanted an actor who could bring the same kind of intellectual menace and aristocratic evil that had made Count Baltar such a memorable character on the science fiction series. The Ice Princess storyline became one of General Hospital's most popular and highly rated story arcs, featuring elaborate international intrigue, exotic locations, and the kind of over-the-top dramatic plotting that was perfect for Colicos's theatrical acting style. His performance as Mikos Kassadine was so successful that it helped establish him as one of daytime television's most recognizable villains, and the character became a cornerstone of the show's mythology for years to come. The impact of Colicos's dual roles as both Baltar and Cassadine was so significant that it followed him for the rest of his career. Even years later, when he appeared in theater productions in his native Toronto, audiences would frequently applaud him after performances and chant, "Baltar lives," showing how deeply both of his villainous characters had resonated with fans. The connection between his science fiction and soap opera roles demonstrated how a single memorable performance could open unexpected doors and create lasting career opportunities in completely different genres of entertainment. Fact 13. Sound effects migrated to KYTT. The distinctive audio and visual elements that made the Cylons so memorable on Battlestar Galactica found a second life in one of television's most beloved talking cars, thanks to the creative recycling practices of producer Glenn Larson, who worked on both shows. When Larson developed Knight Rider in the early 1980s, he decided to incorporate several key design elements from his earlier science fiction series into the character of KITT, the artificially intelligent Trans Am that served as the show's co-star alongside David Hasselhoff. The most obvious connection between the two productions was the distinctive red scanning eye that swept back and forth across the front of KYTT's hood, which was directly inspired by the menacing red visor that moved horizontally across the Cylon Centurion's metallic faces. This visual similarity wasn't accidental. Larson deliberately wanted to create a connection between the advanced artificial intelligence of KITT and the robotic nature of the Cylons, though in this case the AI would be helpful rather than hostile to human characters. Along with the visual elements, Larson also transferred specific sound effects from Battlestar Galactica to Knight Rider, creating audio connections that longtime fans of the space opera would immediately recognize. The electronic swoosh sound that accompanied the movement of the Cylon's scanning eye became incorporated into K1TT's various computer functions and voice interactions, giving the talking car some of the same futuristic audio personality that had made the Cylons so distinctive and memorable. Perhaps most notably, the powerful launch sound that played whenever Colonial Vipers were catapulted from the Battlestar Galactica's flight decks was repurposed as the signature audio effect for KATT's Turbo Boost function. This meant that whenever Michael Knight activated his car's most famous feature to make incredible jumps or achieve impossible speeds, viewers were actually hearing the same sound effect that had previously accompanied space fighters launching into battle against the Cylons, creating an unexpected audio link between two very different but equally popular television series from the same creative team. Fact 14. Props were recycled for Buck Rogers. When Glenn Larson moved on to produce Buck Rogers in the 25th century, just 1 year after Battlestar Galactica was canceled, he found himself in the fortunate position of being able to raid the prop warehouses and sets from his previous science fiction series to help create his new show. This recycling program wasn't just a matter of convenience, it was a practical business decision that allowed the Buck Rogers production to achieve impressive visual effects and futuristic environments while working with a much smaller budget than what had been available for the expensive Battlestar Galactica series. Many of the elaborate costumes, weapons, control panels, and decorative elements that had been created for the colonial warriors and various alien civilizations encountered by the Galactica found new life in Buck Rogers, often with minimal modifications to help them blend into the different aesthetic of the new show. Computer terminals, communication devices, and various pieces of futuristic technology that had been built for the bridge and other interior spaces of the Battlestar were repurposed and incorporated into the Earth Defense Directorate headquarters and other locations in the Buck Rogers universe. This extensive reuse of props and set pieces created some amusing continuity issues for viewers who were fans of both series, as they could sometimes spot familiar items appearing in completely different contexts between the two shows. What had been a crucial piece of colonial technology in one series might appear as Earth defense equipment in the other, creating unintended connections between the two fictional universes that sharp-eyed fans would notice and discuss. The recycling program was so comprehensive that it extended beyond just physical props to include some of the same crew members, special effects techniques, and even similar storytelling approaches that helped give both series a consistent visual and narrative style. This efficient reuse of resources allowed Larson to maintain the high production values that audiences expected from his science fiction productions while managing the financial constraints that came with producing expensive genre television in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Fact 15. Soviet critics called it anti-Russian propaganda. The Cold War tensions of the late 1970s managed to reach even into the realm of science fiction television, when a prominent Soviet journalist accused Battlestar Galactica of being a thinly veiled piece of American anti-Russian propaganda designed to influence public opinion about ongoing nuclear disarmament negotiations. Melor Sturua, writing in the official Soviet newspaper Izvestia, claimed that the show's depiction of peace talks between the human colonies and the robotic Cylons was actually a deliberate allegory for the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty talks, commonly known as SALT, that were taking place between the United States and Soviet Union from 1972 to 1979. According to Sturua's analysis, the fictional negotiations shown in Battlestar Galactica were meant to represent the real-world diplomatic efforts between the superpowers, with the Cylons serving as stand-ins for the Soviet Union and the human colonies representing America and its allies. He was particularly offended by the way the peace talks were portrayed in the show's pilot episode, where the Cylons used the negotiations as a cover for launching a devastating sneak attack that nearly wiped out human civilization, suggesting that this storyline was designed to make viewers suspicious of Soviet motives in the actual arms control discussions. In his newspaper column, Sturua wrote that the galactic negotiations between the people and the Cylons really resembled the U.S. and Soviet SALT talks, though not in their actual form, but in what he called the perverted interpretation of the enemies of the treaty from the family of Washington Hawks. This accusation suggested that the show's creators were deliberately trying to undermine public support for the arms limitation agreements by portraying any peaceful negotiations with a potentially hostile enemy as naive and dangerous. The Soviet criticism highlighted how even fictional entertainment could become entangled in the political tensions of the era, with international observers scrutinizing American television productions for hidden political messages that might influence public opinion about foreign policy and diplomatic relations during one of the most sensitive periods of the Cold War.